Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at Days Gone, Ben Studio's somewhat divisive open-world zombie apocalypse adventure. I'd heard of its contentious critical and user reception over the years, and that it had developed a cult classic-like following. And looking at the Steam reviews for the PC version, plenty of people still advocate for a sequel even now. After almost 70 hours, I find myself agreeing with many of the criticisms from its original review cycle. But, largely due to one unique feature in particular, I'm also in the camp of those who believe Days Gone deserved better than it ultimately got. Along with retrospectives on games from my backlog like this one, I also cover all sorts of game reviews, news, and more here on the channel. So if you enjoy this video or just love talking about video games like I do, consider subscribing. Days Gone was originally released in 2019 for the PS4, then PC in 2021, with the final remastered PS5 version in 2025, whose improvements also carried over to PC. It's a self-described open-world action-adventure game, and that label conveys some of its greatest strengths and biggest weaknesses. The main protagonist, more of an anti-hero really, is Deacon St. John, a former biker turned gun-for-hire fighting to survive in a post-apocalyptic, zombified version of the United States. Gameplay revolves around riding Deacon's bike through this beautiful wilderness, chasing down quest markers and random events, which mainly feature stealth and combat encounters with humans, animals, and zombies. Days Gone is very reminiscent of Ubisoft's style of open-world design, and suffers from many of the same pitfalls, but also has some really unique components that help set it apart and elevate it a bit further. The world of Days Gone is overrun by freakers, Ben's take on zombies, which aren't as fast as those from say 28 Days Later, but can still run and climb, come in several different varieties, and are an interesting take on the overall zombie premise. As the freaker plague unfolds, Deacon gets his wife Sarah onto an evac chopper operated by Nero, the National Emergency Response Organization, but he and his best friend Boozer get left behind. Afterwards, Sarah is presumed dead, and the main plot follows Deacon dealing with his grief and uncovering Sarah's ultimate fate, while surviving as a gun-for-hire in this fictional recreation of Oregon. Deacon and Boozer are both ex-bikers from the Mongrels Club, and translate their rough-and-tumble experience into careers as mercs, bounty hunters, and really just problem solvers in the wake of this apocalypse. Deacon and Sarah's story is told through flashbacks, and while some of their interactions can be corny, they're still mostly endearing, although I am a sucker for stories like this, so your mileage may vary. Deacon and Boozer also have a similarly entertaining relationship, if a bit overdone as the tough-as-nails ex-biker duo stereotypes they often embody. There are a bunch of supporting characters as well, and I actually liked this cast quite a bit. It's a diverse range of characters with different motivations, moralities, and methods, but all with the same ultimate goal: survive the apocalypse in whatever way they think is best. There are some genuinely good story beats that are emotional, scary, and heart-pounding, like one sequence navigating a freaker-filled mine that had me on the edge of my seat. Its pacing can be a bit odd, like when it felt like I was approaching the climax, but ended up being only a little over halfway through, and I was not expecting a whole other half of the game after, but was glad for an excuse to keep going. And, to be fair, I was doing every optional mission and random activity I stumbled across, which certainly extended this tale. The main story is serviceable, but this writing is pretty rough. Deacon suffers from talking to himself too much syndrome, and it's a testament to Sam Witwer's excellent voice acting that this doesn't get more tiresome, considering how much Deacon does this and how many times he repeats the same lines by the end of the game. This self-monologue occasionally proved useful when calling out a nearby item or objective, but it was mostly things like Deacon screaming at enemies from the bushes during a stealth sequence. I mean, they can't actually hear him, but still. Deacon also sounds constantly angry, like he wakes up every morning to find someone pissed in his cereal. To be fair, he is a former hardcore biker and combat veteran, on top of living through an actual zombie apocalypse, but even then, it's still a bit overdone. Lots of this dialogue is conducted over his radio, but it does restart if interrupted by unexpected combat or random events, so you never miss anything important. There are also plenty of journal entries, voice recordings, and other collectibles to help with world building and immersion, and finding these and poring over their content was always a treat. Environmental storytelling is also excellent, better than the actual narrative in some cases, with mass graves scattered about, different iconography in areas occupied by the various factions, and even stuff like human sacrifices. There's some really grim shit, and this world is haunting and well constructed, even if the writing doesn't always match that quality, a couple banger lines aside. I'm going to briefly get into spoiler territory for a bit, so if you don't want the story ruined, skip ahead to the next topic now. Good to go? Let's get into it. Obviously, Sarah isn't actually dead, and seeing her again for the first time was a fucking gut punch, even if you suspected it was coming. The missions and scenes with Sarah after you find her are some of the game's best, and how Deacon reacts to actually finding her after all that time and processing how she's changed since they were separated is portrayed very well. You also find out more details about the Freaker Plague, like how it came from the lab Sarah used to work in. You could kinda tell the plot is headed in that direction too, but the reveal still has a pretty good payoff regardless. The game's ending is a little corny, with Deacon becoming a figurehead for the survivors and reuniting with the love of his life to live happily ever after. But after all the shit he and everyone else just went through, they definitely deserve it. Several secondary plot threads are only wrapped up after the main story ends, which encourages you to spend more time with the game and concludes some stories while leaving others purposefully unresolved. Days Gone was clearly set up for a sequel, with Captain Curry leaving for Reno, Sarah wanting to cure the Freakers, and the O'Brien revelation at the very end, and holy shit, what a reveal that was. Finding out Nero has been experimenting on its own people with the Freaker Plague, and it's apparently kinda working, was a gigantic mindfuck. And a great twist that actually shocked me. It's just a shame we're most likely never going to see any of this continued or resolved. Days Gone features several different ways to play. The baseline story mode with permadeath, speedrun, and New Game Plus variations, along with Horde Assault and challenges, more arcadey alternatives, and a photo mode to boot. Permadeath and speedrun, Horde Assault, and photo mode are all part of the Broken Road DLC pack, so you'll need to snag that for $10 if it piques your interest. I can't begin to imagine doing a permadeath run, but I'm sure there are some sickos out there who live for that shit. Gameplay itself is a mixture of stealth and combat, facilitated through quest lines and open world activities. A bit of crafting is thrown in too, repairing equipment with scrap or harvesting animals and plants. Just enough to help with immersion without feeling tacked on or burdensome. This open world is a single map broken into several zones, each with activities and collectibles, along with a checklist to track their completion, which I appreciated. The map itself is quite expansive, even more than I realized at first, and clearing specific enemy camps reveals other locations in that local area. Deacon's bike and the game's bed serve as save stations, and you can sleep to advance the day-night cycle, which is pretty important, as less freakers are out and about during the day, while nighttime means more zombies, but also more opportunities for stealth. Storylines and their associated jobs, Days Gone's version of quests, make up the meat of its content, and its main quest is paired with side missions related to specific characters and settlements, along with overarching objectives tied to map and activity completion. Some, like rescuing another survivor from crazy cultists, infiltrating an old science lab, or attacking a tightly defended island, are actually pretty good, but most boil down to fetch quests, rescue missions, or clearing out enemy camps, and were pretty basic and forgettable. There are some missions with companions, who are surprisingly competent in moving around and engaging enemies. Nothing too complicated, but they get the job done better than others. A couple insta-fail stealth missions are also sprinkled in, thankfully at an infrequent clip, but they are still a pain in the ass and just terrible design. Deacon also rides out on several motorcycle chases, which feel rough in the early game without an upgraded bike. Once your ride is improved and you get some better weapons, they're a piece of cake though, and you can shoot at enemies with the sidearm both during and outside of those sequences, or just ram them into the dirt. Completing quests rewards new crafting recipes, weapons, and cosmetics, which is exactly the way it should be. And these storylines are often intertwined, where progressing one can move others forward too, which was a cool little system. Random encounters pop up as question marks on the map, and feature brief activities like rescuing survivors captured by bandits or trapped by freakers, or evading roadblocks and ambushes. These can even take you back to previously cleared locations, which is a nice reuse of assets. What's not is rescuing the same NPC and hearing the same lines of dialogue 20 different times. It's not a huge deal, but is noticeable early on and pretty egregious by the game's end. A lot of these encounters are generic, but some occasionally shine through with a higher bar of quality and more memorability, like being lured into a shipping container ambush then fighting my way to safety. I also stumbled upon multiple arenas clearly designed for combat encounters that were sitting empty, only becoming populated when specific steps were triggered, which was kinda weird and disappointing. Survival vision is one of Deacon's abilities that highlights items in the environment, helps you find objectives and resources, and can also be upgraded to outline enemies, even when hidden or behind cover. This comes in handy during Witcher-style tracking quests, where you inspect something, follow some tracks, find the next clue, rinse and repeat. And while simple, they can lead to some interesting encounters. Certain areas are only accessible via bike traversal or engaging in environmental destruction, and some of these simple bike jump challenges are obstacles to finding and collecting everything out there. Those collectibles include notes, tourism adverts, and historical markers. And Deacon can even collect songs and cultist sermons, which I found very cool. While much of its content is fairly forgettable, this open world's interactivity and flexibility are extremely well done, and probably its biggest strengths, aside from stunning visuals that we'll talk about later. Instances like infiltrating an enemy checkpoint, then watching them get killed off by wolves, or a crazy fight with high-level freakers, humans, and wildlife all at once happen quite often, and were always a delight. Watching enemies fight each other never got old, and having a front row seat to the carnage while sitting back and picking off the stragglers always felt awesome. There's plenty of flexibility in how you approach each encounter, beyond just stealth or combat, with options like poisoning foes to pit them against one another, attracting freakers to take out enemy camps for you, and more. And all of these options are both varied and enjoyable. When things do get to be too much and Deacon ends up dead, there are plenty of autosaves in the open world and checkpoints during story missions, so you never need to worry about losing too much progress. To its credit, Days Gone does a good job of constantly throwing activities your way, and just when it looks like you've cleared out the quest log, some new ones pop up, giving you plenty of excuses to take Deacon's bike out for a few more rides. There's an entirely new late-game area as well. After starting to explore it, I found myself thinking, it'd be nice if there were some endgame activities in here, and there actually are, but only one, and it's unfortunately pretty unremarkable. The zone itself is still pretty chunky though, with another 10 to 20 hours of content at least, which was a nice surprise after assuming I was getting close to the final ending. There are several lockout warnings when reaching certain points, but you're never fully blocked off from completing anything, and the game opens up again after the credits, with some quests only resolved once the main story has been wrapped up, which was another cool inclusion. Days Gone's open world isn't groundbreaking with its quest design or activities, but does provide plenty of reasons to ride out and engage with its driving and combat, which always felt great and made each new adventure worth the time. Between quests and encounters, exploration and activities, and finding upgrades and collectibles, there's a lot to see and do. But a lot of that content follows Ubisoft-style design, with repetitive activities and simple missions. So if you're burned out on that type of gameplay, or just can't stand it in general, Days Gone probably isn't a good fit for you. Deacon's bike is the primary method of getting around that open world, and it feels great to drive, once you get the hang of it. There's plenty of customization too, both functional and cosmetic, and tinkering with your ride is fun, even for someone like me who doesn't typically care too much about systems like that. And, about 50 hours in, I finally realized that the bike in the main menu reflects your in-game modifications too, which is a nice little touch. The motorcycle also has a limited boost feature to help you clear big jumps and catch up with targets during those chase missions, and can also be loaded with saddlebags that provide ammo refills. The look, and more importantly feel of driving, changes with the weather and terrain, whether it's snow or rain, desert or mud, and feeling the bike slide on snow or drift further during a storm is super cool. You can fill up on gas and purchase repairs at survivor camps, but this can be expensive, and handling them in the field is often more desirable. You just need to find the necessary resources first. I did run out of gas once or twice, but it's never too hard to find a refill, and with some upgrades and skill points, the bike can withstand quite a bit of damage too. Freakers can tackle you off your bike, which is actually pretty scary, and you can also be shot off by guns and knocked off by traps too, and need to stay alert when out and about. I almost never fast traveled, which is a testament to how good bike traversal feels. I'm not usually a fast travel guy anyway, preferring to take in the world and see what I can find, but still almost never felt the urge to use it, and only did so in the late game when moving across long distances. The bike also needs enough gas in the tank to do so, and no obstacles can be blocking your route. Upgrading the gas tank allows for fast traveling further and more often before needing a refill too. It takes a little getting used to, but once you've got it, riding the bike feels great. Just be careful, because crashing too severely will kill you. When moving on foot, you can slide and slam into cover, but this isn't a strictly cover-based shooter. There's plenty of freedom with movement, like climbing buildings, creating new paths with explosives, and multiple routes to reaching objectives. Deacon can't swim for shit apparently, so avoid water at all costs, whether on foot or when riding his bike. Crafting in Days Gone is simple and streamlined, with a quick access wheel and small smattering of ingredients, and only a few are required for most recipes. These options include healing items and temporary stat buffs, throwables like molotovs and pipe bombs, along with melee weapons and various traps and distractions. There is a lot of prying open car hoods with Deacon's knife and scavenging resources strewn about, but it never feels oppressive, and picking up multiple items with one button press is a really nice quality of life feature that I wish more games had. Different regions have specific ingredients to collect, and I sometimes ran out, but this wasn't an issue very often. Helpful guidance like tow trucks carrying gas tanks and police cars having ammo crates was very clever design, and new resources and recipes become available as you progress. There is an actual inventory menu, but I almost never used it, and did pretty much everything straight from the crafting wheel, which mostly worked fine. Deacon's loadout consists of a primary, secondary, and special weapon. Primary options are things like rifles and shotguns, secondaries are pistols and SMGs, while the special slot features crossbows, snipers, and LMGs, which are specialized for different encounters. There's plenty of variety and some crossover between classes, along with some really cool and fun options, like a Tommy gun or the Rock Chuck AR that comes with a built-in silencer and was my personal favorite. A big component of this system is determining what's best for each situation. Should you rock that silenced AR and a sniper for stealthily attacking a bandit camp, or switch to a shotgun, SMG, and LMG for taking on a group of freakers? The crossbow is extremely versatile, and can use different bolts like the poison that causes enemies to attack each other, or even explosive tips, and is silenced by default. Some guns can also be silenced with scavenged materials, or by buying silencers from camp vendors. Ranged weapons are tiered, and the best options are locked behind quest and world progression. Low and mid-tier weapons feel significantly weaker against stronger enemies, so acquiring the best options should always be top priority. Your loadout can be swapped at weapons lockers found in camps and cleared checkpoints. The only way to permanently unlock new weapons is buying them or unlocking via quests, which is kinda understandable, but also kinda lame when you find a cool gun that's ultimately useless. Deacon also has a dedicated melee weapon, ranging from fence posts to heavy-duty maces, which are scavenged or crafted. These need maintained with scrap, otherwise they will eventually break, with higher quality versions lasting longer. But you always have your boot knife as a weaker last resort. My biggest gripe is that selecting weapons and gear in the equipment wheel felt a little finicky at times, but maybe I was just rushing in the heat of combat. Speaking of combat, I played Days Gone on its normal difficulty. For games like this, I'm not looking for an incredible level of challenge, but combat still wasn't a cakewalk. It gets easier over time as Deacon gets stronger, but even late-game encounters still weren't a walk in the park. The game isn't hard, but combat is punishing. Enemy blows can take out a quarter to a third of your health early on, and getting swarmed by freakers can be a death sentence, no matter how strong you are. Melee combat is pretty damn brutal, and whether you're shanking marauders with Deacon's knife or smashing freaker skulls with a sledgehammer, it feels excellent. Very grounded, hefty and weighty, with lots of cool animations. Enemies can latch onto Deacon, who can then break free by completing a short quicktime event, and new skills unlock different counters or even finishers after doing so, along with a chance to land critical hits for an insta-kill. You can roll to escape enemies, which also works if you're caught with the ranged weapon out, and there's a soft lock-on system that helps keep you pointed towards the enemy Deacon is facing. Things start off feeling pretty weak, but skills and upgraded weapons make melee ultimately feel incredibly good, and beating enemies to a pulp was one of my favorite parts of this combat loop. Gunplay takes some adjusting to, too, and lower-tier early-game weapons feel rough, but shooting is also great once you get the hang of it and acquire better guns, which all feel and sound great, and mechanics like shoulder switching for better angles are also present. The core pillar of ranged combat is focus, an activatable ability that slows down time, allowing Deacon to quickly take out multiple enemies along with slowing down freaker hordes and elite variations. Pulling off focus kills feels great, and is extremely powerful, allowing you to basically invalidate some encounters against small groups of foes while making large-scale encounters much more manageable. Proper use of equipment is key, with throwables like frag grenades, pipe bombs, and molotovs playing a huge role. You eventually gain access to napalm molotovs that are devastating against freakers, and using deployables like mines and remote detonated bombs is also hugely important. Structured set-piece encounters, both against human enemies and freakers, were where combat truly shined. And while open-world encounters were still fun, these were the true highlights of the show. I wasn't sure about combat at first, but it does feel good once you settle in, and every weapon sounds and looks awesome, with a huge and distinct variety, like the kick of a shotgun versus the stream of bullets from an LMG or crack of a sniper rifle, plus those skull-smashing melee options. Days Gone features a solid range of enemies against which to deploy Deacon's arsenal, with a cast of human, animal, and freaker varieties. Animals are the simplest, with wolves, bears, and mountain lions to contend with, and freakified versions that we'll cover momentarily. Humans are the next step up, with a decent range of thematic factions that all largely function the same. You have the Rippers, drug-fueled cultists who mutilate themselves while seeking to become more like the zombies they emulate, along with marauder bandits, crazy anarchists, and even a post-apocalyptic paramilitary organization. Their rosters all feature melee weapon rushers, gun-toting soldiers, snipers, and heavy weapon carriers. There are some small differences, like Rippers that light themselves on fire before rushing at you, along with elite enemies that don helmets and armor that need shot off. But that's about where it ends, and these are definitely more thematic than functional. Where enemy design really shines is with the Freakers, which come in several distinct varieties. Swarmers are basic zombies that run at you with reckless abandon, while Bleachers have been toughened up with thicker skin thanks to freezing cold or the shining sun. Newts are infected children that clamber on all fours and climb up buildings with unnatural speed, while Breakers are huge, unnaturally strong opponents, not to mention those infected wolves and bears from before. Each enemy type has unique attacks and movesets. Screamers disorient you with auditory blasts, while Reachers, the most dangerous Freakers of all, maneuver and attack with superhuman speed. New Freaker types are sometimes introduced with little boss fights, and all have a clear explanation for why they ended up this way, like the hulking Breakers having high levels of steroids in their bodies prior to infection, whether injected or otherwise. All of these enemies are incredibly well designed. They certainly look the part, with desiccated skin and unsettling jerky movements as they run at you, clamber up buildings, or stagger after being blinded by Deacon's flashlight. Their sound design is equally fitting, with all manner of creepy audio cues, chittering and screeching that makes you feel right at home in the thick of this take on a zombie apocalypse. They'll even sometimes fight each other, with the bigger, deadlier varieties picking on smaller, weaker counterparts. I guess zombification doesn't wash away the quality of being a roid-raging asshole, and these interactions were always fun to watch. Crucially, Freakers are primarily attracted by noise, which can be used to your advantage with traps and distractions, or it can be an unwanted side effect of riding Deacon's bike or engaging in gunfights. Elite Freakers are more than a match for Deacon one-on-one, but even small groups of Swarmers can easily overwhelm you if unprepared, especially early on with shitty gear and less experience. The enemy AI was generally solid, not perfect, but usually reacting to you pretty well based on their surroundings and specifics of each encounter. Some enemies felt a little bullet spongy early on, or without upgraded weapons equipped, but even the toughest ones can be taken down quickly with the right loadout. There are a couple boss fights sprinkled in, which boil down to being enemies with health bars, and while visually cool, were mechanically very simple. There was one really cool idea of fighting an enemy while high out of your mind on drugs, but it ended very quickly and was laughably easy. Nothing really stood out here, but that's okay, because the game's real bosses are its Freaker Hordes. Hordes are the real selling point of Days Gone. Seeing one for the first time is terrifying and unforgettable, and they will fuck you up if you're not prepared. First, you need to locate each swarm, either by stumbling across them out in the world, especially at night, or finding their hibernation locations. Eventually, the general area of each horde is marked on the map, but you need to track down their exact location, which can still be a surprise. I should have known better than to stroll into a mine without a care in the world in the middle of the day, since it's the perfect place for them to hide. Preparing for each of these encounters is key. Should you attack during the night, providing more room to maneuver, or during the day while the Freakers are hibernating in their lair? Equipping the proper weapons and bringing enough traps and throwables is also vital. Does the surrounding terrain and nearby explosives provide an advantage? This process feels like a little minigame, where you become the hunter stalking their prey. Bullet penetration actually matters when shooting through waves of Freakers, and other upgrades like a perk that allows you to reload while sprinting is a lifesaver, and can make a huge difference. Taking down your first horde is intense, and you can clearly tell I had no idea what I was doing, not using the environment or nearby objects to my advantage whatsoever. Some hordes are bigger than others, but the sheer number of Freakers in the biggest ones was mind-blowing, and seeing them all surging at you was incredibly, well, freaky. Some fights deteriorate into shoot, run away while reloading, rinse and repeat, but using the environment and all of those tools to your advantage feels awesome. Deploying throwables and explosives, funneling them through choke points, and delaying them with obstacles all feel so good. Even after some experience, these fights still aren't easy, and can eat up your ammo, heals, and supplies. There's no shame in running away if you aren't prepared, but they do get more manageable over time. The horde mechanic absolutely blew my mind, and never got old, even after tackling dozens of these encounters. There's a lot about Days Gone I liked, and a lot I didn't, but if there was one redeeming quality that earned this IP the chance at a sequel, it was this, and it's a real shame we'll probably never see the mechanic ever again. Stealth in Days Gone is simple, and starts with marking enemies, which shows their health and awareness levels. You can hide in bushes, dumpsters, and behind cover to avoid or cool down detection levels, all while pulling off stealth kills with your knife and silenced weapons. Assassinations look and sound just as brutal and visceral as melee kills, and stealth takedowns look, sound, and feel awesome, even if they're pretty easy to pull off. These animations can be a little wonky, and triggering assassinations can be fickle at times, which didn't happen frequently but was annoying when it would get you caught. Like, I can't assassinate this guy because he's leaning on the wall at a certain angle? What? I did love how you can move at a slow jog while sneaking, which is a really underrated feature that more games should copy. Deacon can utilize rocks and crafted devices to distract enemies and draw their attention. This AI was not the smartest or most aware, and while Freakers were more sensitive than humans, they were also quite easy to avoid. Working your way through an entire camp undetected is awesome, but stealth doesn't always go according to plan, and it's not always clear why it fails when it does. Thankfully, killing enemies in the open is just as fun. Stealth is usually the best, or at least easiest way to approach most encounters, although you're free to go in guns blazing too. Overall, it was generic and easy, but still enjoyable for stealth suckers like me. There are 3 skill trees in Days Gone: melee, ranged, and survival, with new skills unlocked via skill points gained from XP. There is a wide variety to acquire. Some add brand new abilities to your arsenal, while others improve the potency of consumables or provide general buffs like better weapon accuracy and reload speed, or improved melee weapon durability and damage. I slept on survival skills at first, and there are some potent ones in that tree, but I still had all the ones I really wanted by about level 35, or 75 to 80% of the way through the game. I missed some level up notifications, and there were a couple times a bunch of skill points were sitting unused and I had no idea until I checked, which was a little odd. Thankfully, leveling never felt too slow or restricted, and there was always a solid stream of quests and activities to keep you going. Deacon's 3 core stats are health, stamina, and focus, which govern his health and stamina pools, shocker, along with how long each focus activation lasts. Nero injectors provide permanent upgrades for each stat, and are unlocked by restoring power to their checkpoints, one of the many open-world activities. I maxed out all 3 at about 60 hours, post-ending, but very soon after. Having more health and stamina was good, but longer uptime for focus definitely made the biggest difference. Along with Deacon's personal growth, there are several survivor encampments out in the world with their own progression paths. As you complete quests and activities, turn in bounties and gather resources, you'll gain trust and credits, both specific to every camp. Each level unlocks better gear for purchase, like new weapons and bike upgrades, and late-game camps have the best of each. I maxed out almost all of the camps and never felt strapped for cash. And while your trust levels do impact how the main story unfolds, the final ending remains unchanged regardless. These camps are simple, and sometimes felt underutilized, featuring lots of empty space with nothing going on. But things like vendors greeting you and even having little conversations as you shop helps them feel more alive than they otherwise would. Overall, Days Gone does a good job of making you feel more powerful over time as you unlock new skills, acquire better gear, and gain trust with those settlements, turning Deacon from a regular old bounty hunter into a respected, and sometimes feared, killing machine. Along with the main story mode, Days Gone features several other ways to play, although as mentioned before, many of these are locked behind the Broken Road DLC. The first is Horde Assault, where you survive horde after horde while exploring, opening random supply drops that grant more resources and gear, and ultimately seeking a new high score with each run. You gradually unlock positive and negative modifiers to change these sessions, along with new characters to play as other than Deacon, which is cool, and some unlocks even carry over to other modes. While decently fun and offering plenty of replayability, this wasn't really my cup of tea. The second are challenges, pre-constructed scenarios with specific objectives like defeat a horde within a certain time limit, survive freaker attacks all night, complete time trials on your bike, or take on escalating waves of human enemies. This mode also has unlockable modifiers, gear, and characters acquired through higher scores, and I really enjoyed these smaller, quicker missions that reminded me of Spec Ops from the OG Call of Duty games. Fighting off waves of human enemies while scavenging weapons and ammo was a ton of fun, and I wish there were more scenarios like that, although driving a golf cart while jamming to music and whisking passengers away to safety was a close second. Permadeath, speedrun, and New Game Plus variations are all available for story mode playthroughs, and photo mode is included for all you virtual photographers out there too. The graphics in Days Gone look pretty damn good for a game originally released in 2019, even with those PC and next-gen upgrades, which really shine through. Its menus are detailed, bright, and really stood out, with style and readability that are excellent. The UI is super nice to look at, but the game is a little redundant with its hints sometimes, like tutorials popping up for things I'd already done dozens of times prior. Beyond that, there are some really beautiful sights to take in while driving around, cutting down enemies, or just taking a breather, with some genuinely breathtaking scenes that I'm going to remember for a long time. I'm a sucker for snow and night skies in video games, and Days Gone nails the fuck out of both. The game's draw distance is also impressive, which helps with enjoying those views. Trees and ground cover are dense and look good, accentuating those environmental visuals even further. Environmental contrasts are also striking, and can go from beautiful god rays to sobering piles of corpses in an instant, which are all incredibly detailed and feed into the world building and story. Character models look pretty good in cutscenes, if a bit rough outside them at times, but are still really solid overall, and Freakers in particular look and sound absolutely horrific, which I love. Another area that stood out were the visual effects for explosives, which were top-notch, and the way they smoked, sparked, and flung enemy bodies around with their impact blew me away. This is a gorgeous game, there's no denying that, with beautiful scenery, night skies, and incredible views, like driving through a thunderstorm at sunrise, that just can't be beat. The Oregon scenery is beautiful, and I love driving around and taking everything in any chance I got. Audio in Days Gone is also solid, but a step down from those fantastic visuals. The main menu theme is really nice and started things off strong, but its soundtrack ultimately ended up a disappointment. It was extremely generic and even non-existent for the vast majority of the game, barring a couple instrumental songs and twangy ballads. Beyond the main menu and foreboding music during horde encounters, there was nothing really memorable otherwise. Despite a lackluster soundtrack, its spatial audio is excellent, and you can pinpoint exactly where enemies are from this sound alone, even when facing multiple foes at once. Sound effects are also great, like revving Deacon's bike and hearing its tires screech, along with gunfire and melee impacts. As mentioned before, the audio design of its Freakers is especially uncanny in the way they screech, chitter, and roar. And on the other hand, smashing their brains in also sounds fantastic. While dialogue and writing can be lacking, the game's voice acting is great, and even random NPCs give it their all, maybe even a little too much at times. Motion capture and character visuals can look a bit dated, but those VA performances range from decent at worst to fantastic at best. The sights and sounds of Oregon are all incredible, and this is one of the prettiest games I've experienced in recent memory. I've never been to Oregon and had no idea about its natural beauty, but now I really want to visit, which is a credit to Ben's immaculate recreation of this slice of the United States. I played the PC version of Days Gone on Steam, although I did break out a PS5 controller for an authentic feel, including that infuriatingly short battery life. The settings menu is solid, including accessibility options, and even shows real-time FOV changes in the background, which is a nice touch. Unfortunately, that's where the good things end, and I suffered from near constant hitching and stuttering during bike traversal for the entirety of my playthrough. On one hand, I could have reduced my settings, which were all maxed out, and traversing this open world on a fast-moving bike surely doesn't help. But on the other, running a 7-year-old game at 1440p on a Ryzen 7 78X3D and NVIDIA 5080 and still getting those issues consistently was far from ideal. I was able to hit almost 300 frames, but this was very inconsistent. Capping my FPS at 120 seemed like the sweet spot between form and function, but that stuttering never abated, and really took away from those beautiful scenes. The one silver lining was that no stutters occurred during non-traversal gameplay, cutscenes, or anything else. But it's still pretty bad that driving around was never smooth, since this is such a huge chunk of the game's core loop, and I shudder to think of how this ran on the PS4 back at release. Similar to those performance problems, bugs also popped up right from the start. During the very first quest, Deacon shot a character whose body immediately disappeared. I guess his bullets are just so powerful, they delete people from existence entirely. This was admittedly funny, but also immersion-breaking, and a sign of things to come, as bugs continued to plague this experience. There were funny animations, like bodies flopping around and camera angles being blocked by the environment, which weren't too egregious, and seeing those flying bodies never got old. The glitches continued with messed up visuals, like a weird light flickering in the distance then disappearing, hints getting stuck on screen, and glowing enemies. This escalated into partially missing objects and textures, which was another funny one, but still immersion-breaking and impossible to ignore. Then there were the gameplay bugs, like enemies phasing through terrain and interact prompts being fickle. There was one time I stopped at a gas station to refill my bike, and pulled up right next to a group of enemies clearly waiting to ambush me, but they never reacted and just sat there, letting me kill them instead. Were they programmed to attack only if I pulled up right next to the pump, or did they just bug out? Granted, these were only minor issues, and I never encountered any broken or stuck quests that were unable to progress, but these were still very noticeable and very frequent, and once again impossible to ignore. There was also one very strange bug where the game got stuck in a running state on Steam, and I had to force close the program, reboot my PC, and verify the game files to fix it. This only happened once, but was definitely a weird one. Like performance, a small silver lining was that I experienced no hard crashes or game-breaking bugs in my 65 hours, so credit where it's due for that at least, although Days Gone remains, to this day, quite a buggy mess. One of my key indicators of really enjoying a game is when I dread reaching the end, because I don't want the experience to be over. and Days Gone is definitely one of those games. It took me roughly 60 hours to finish the main quest and most, but not all side content and collectibles, plus another 5 spent checking out those other game modes. And I still plan to go back and wrap up as much as I can, like trying new loadouts, fighting hordes, and whatever else there is to find. Despite all of its flaws, which cannot and should not be ignored, I still found myself really liking Days Gone, and ultimately understanding why so many feel so strongly about its treatment and legacy. For you zombie fanatics out there, this is an easy recommendation, and is one of the best video game translations of the genre that I've ever played. For fans of Ubisoft-style open worlds with formulaic, checklisty design, this is an easy recommendation as well. For those who can tolerate repetitive open world design and a subpar story, but still enjoy engaging combat and traversal, I can still recommend Days Gone, albeit not as strongly. And, regardless of any of that, you need to have a decent tolerance for bugs and performance issues, because you will run into both. For anyone who places a heavy emphasis on strong narrative and open world design, or has a low tolerance for unpolished titles, I cannot recommend Days Gone at all, which is a damn shame because I truly believe it deserves more than it got. It's not a perfect game by any means, with noticeable pitfalls in its open world design, narrative and writing, along with performance issues and bugs. But it is a damn good and memorable one, and one that earned itself a sequel in my eyes. Despite those pitfalls, I really enjoyed my time with Days Gone. Its world is so beautiful, combat feels great, and I'm a sucker for this kind of story, even though I'm not a huge zombie guy. Its horde feature remains the real standout, and is so cool, fun, and unique that I wish I could recommend Days Gone to anyone just so they could experience it. But I can't overlook its narrative, open world, and technical shortcomings. I would have loved to see a sequel that expanded the mechanic even further, with more structured encounters, a heavier emphasis on fighting bigger conglomerations with more freaker variety, and maybe even a multiplayer Left 4 Dead style mode thrown in too. But with the sequel pitched and rejected by Sony, Ben's live service project cancelled, and the state of the industry in general, I hate to say we may never see another game from the studio, period. Which would be a real shame, as their Horde idea deserves to live on. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more gaming content, and let me know your thoughts on Days Gone in the comments below. Does the idea of fighting massive freaker hordes as Deacon St. John seem at all appealing? Or does the repetitive open-world design and subpar writing overpower any sense of wonder at those massive zombie encounters? Either way, thank you for watching. You're a real one and I appreciate you, and hope to see you in the next one. Catch you later!